Everybody, welcome to our 7th module with the Renaissance Academy in Year 2. Today we are going to begin our 2-part study into the figure. I'm going to give you some pointers and advice and things to get you going, and then I have a live model today in the studio, and I'm going to show you how to get going setting up a model for you to further your figure studies. All right, so let's get going. First, I'm going to show you how to work with one of those wooden mannequins. You've seen these before in the art stores. I'm going to show you how to use one of these and for what reason and purpose. Then I have a China figurine that I'm going to show you how to do a figure drawing of. And then I'm going to get into my model and show you how to do a couple of sketches with your model, and then to set them up and get them going with the lighting and everything. And I will put the first layer of that on canvas. Now next week for our figure study class, we are going to talk about how to get that painting finished of the figure. All right, so let's jump in. All right, so it's possible that you've seen these wooden mannequins in art stores and elsewhere. I'm going to be using this today to talk a little bit about the figure. And I have a China figurine here as well. I wanted to use this to discuss some elements of figure drawing, and then we'll jump into using a model. Before we get going though, I want to show you some books that I strongly recommend for your study. This first book is called The Practice and Science of Drawing by Harold Speed, and I strongly recommend this. This was one of my first books that I got at the Atelier Le Sueur, and I loved this one for it just breaks down the essentials of drawing into very simplistic form, but it is extremely well written, and it'll take you to where you need to be in the 2nd year of the Academy. And I couldn't recommend this more. I've gone through this book numerous times, and it discusses mass drawing, line drawing, composition, and everything you need to know about even setting up a model as it pertains to lighting in the window. So anyway, I strongly recommend this book. I also picked up early in my studies this one called Drawing Lessons from the Great Masters. Now this book by Robert Beverly Hale, he was the instructor of my instructor. And so I studied under Annette Le Sueur, who studied under Richard Lack, who studied under Robert Beverly Hale. So this book really, it takes each of these master drawings and then it breaks it down into what they're talking about, and they're labeled so you can really understand the different points that they're trying to make in your studies of greater drawing. Now, obviously, we're talking about figure and figure painting, and so there's a lot on portraiture in here, but you also have some fantastic in-depth studies into the figure, and as well as anatomy. So another book I strongly recommend, Drawing Lessons from the Great Masters. Now this book is by a friend of mine, Rob Zeller, and this book, he put together everything he always wanted in a figure book, and he's got fantastic artists in here, beautiful work, and just it really breaks down understanding the figure. And I'm just want to zip through here so you can see some of the studies and understand further why I strongly recommend this book. So Rob Zeller's The Figurative Artist Handbook. He is a fantastic artist as well as instructor, and this book is worth getting. You can find it on Amazon. Okay, so that aside, I'm going to jump in now to understanding a little bit more about the mannequin and the China figure. Okay, so I'm going to start with my little mannequin, and I want to just talk to you briefly about how I go about selecting form and function to make it work for a figure drawing. So I've got my little guy positioned like he's running, and I want to talk about just getting the overall gesture of the pose right. So I've got the head like this, and the torso like this. The head is always, here's the head, positioned over the foot that is taking the weight. So the torso comes like this, the knee, the calf is slightly bent, and then the foot. So this is sort of the gesture of the pose. I've got an arm coming out like this, and this one coming back. Right now I'm not concerned with counting heads or negative space or anything. I'm just trying to get the overall feel of the pose. All right, now, oops, the other leg. Okay, so now I want to begin talking about where the belly button would be pointing and where the whole chest cavity is going to have its positioning. So I've got the rib cage in here, and I'm obviously my person is going this direction. So I'm looking at where that chest line splits on my model. And it's about in that direction. The belly button then would be pointed in this direction also. So my wood components of my guy come like this. And then we've got that ball in there, kind of showing that the spine would be altering in this way. And they do have better mannequins now on the market, so you could probably find much more suitable mannequins for your needs if you needed one. So again, in the meantime, this plane here, I'll put these in some sort of shadow because I've got strong lighting on my mannequin. So we've got a shadow in this way. I'll just draw the shape of the shadow. If the sooner you can start thinking about all of these as shadow pieces as having a sense of form and their own space integrity, the stronger your work will be. This arm over here has its own shadow shape. This is all shadow in there. Okay, so now the front of the face, we've got the ball. Well, the top of the shoulders here has sort of a platform, and we'll give that a sense of space here. And then the ball of the neck rests on top of that. So then that, of course, has its own shape integrity. And then the front of the face. We can erase some of my loose helper lines that were there just to suggest form. So then the front of the face is all in shadow. And these are all very important to help get you to understand form and function when you are drawing your own figures, especially from life. From life is just a whole different animal, as you're about to see in this video. So this joint, which would be our deltoid, has shadow underneath it. But I'm going to squint down and see the shadow of this arm and the shadow of the torso all connected. So this is one piece of shadow in there. So we'll shadow that all in. we got a ball that's represented for the elbow, and then the forearm. Again, the ball for the wrist, and then the palm, the hand is represented as an almond shape. We've got this long cast shadow down the arm. Okay, now coming back here to the ball of the torso, we have it coming around the front like this. And then the front of this is picking up light that is coming down this way. So this is not going to be receiving as much light as this plane turn. And so by keeping that lighter passage, that lighter value in there, it gives us the sense that light is hitting that area. And then the pelvis is now turned outward this way a little bit. And then under the pelvis, we have that ball that is represented there. We'll just darken that in. And this whole thigh on this side comes down. Again, taking into some of that perspective that we see the curve more like this. This is all pretty much in shadow, short of a little strip of light there that's not very bright. So we'll cast this all in shadow here because it is directly underneath. And give this a light shadow. Okay, the knee. And then we have this calf coming down. Again, also in shadow, except for a sliver of light right in there. So I'll cast this in shadow. And then this other leg, we've got the hip ball right in here, and that is represented as an angle this way, and a softened. Now you do not need to have one of these mannequins to make this lesson work for you, but the point is if you have a figurine around your house that you can use, break it down into these simplistic shapes and forms, and then work at capturing the gesture and essence of the position, the figure's form. Cast a shadow on this. And so that gives us a sense of form for our figure. Oh, this arm. Okay, so now how does that translate into something we can use? We're not going to be drawing mannequins all over the place. So what you could do then is to take this form that you have drawn and put it into an actual person. So we can use the head, come up with a face in that area and a neck based off this, and we have the shoulders. And we know that the chest comes down like this. The split of that chest is there. Belly button is in this area. So let's give our guy a briefcase, like he's running. Catch a bus or something. And put clothes as they would be formed along this design. We know that this is all shadow in here. This is all going to be in shadow in this area now because we know he's running this way. You can give him a wrist, a fist holding something, whatever. We'll give him a briefcase if that's what our story is. So we know from our model that this whole leg is in shadow, but that sunlight would be hitting the top of this foot over here. So we could draw all of this in reference to our model. With sunlight hitting the top of his torso here as he's running. Give him a belt or something. His shoe, heel would be getting more light. And the rest of it's in shadow down there. Anyway, so, and then his face as he's running is all going to be in shadow over here. There's not much neck that we have to speak from, so maybe he's looking down or something. So that hopefully helps with getting some of that anatomy of those mannequins that we see all the time. Sort of figured out how to use those for our advantage. Okay, all right, so there's how that plays out. Now I also want to show you how to take the China figurine. So again, here we have, I always try to get the gesture of a pose the way I see it. Your chest line, the neck, the head. Looking at the hips. And her feet. Come down like this. We'll deal with that soon. Okay. So you may have a figurine, something along this line, or whatever. Most people have some sort of statue laying around. You can always go to, I found her at a antique store. I actually have a pair of similar design. Both of them are a similar situation. And then just set them up, get some nice dramatic lighting. And if you can, try to find some that are fairly anatomically accurate. It'll be a little bit easier for you as you are trying to get that understanding of anatomy. Now there are some beautiful, strong shadows on this sculpture that I kind of want to try to carve out before I go too far. And get more accurate. And her face has, most of it is in shadow. I'm not worried about all of her hair trappings and stuff. I can take my eraser and just erase out some of the masses. Okay, chest line, and then there's this shadow that shows all this wonderful contouring of the torso. So I'm going to erase some of my lines that I had when I was doing the gesture, and going to get some of the form by showing you how you can use diagonal lines and cross-hatching to show that shape and anatomy. So when I get one skin or one layer of cross-hatching down, I'm going to come back through and build up those layers very delicately. I'm not pressing harder, I'm just doing another layer. Our belly button would be right about that area. All the time I'm flicking my eyes back to the model to confirm that I am in the right place with the right piece of anatomy value that I'm working on for that passage. And I alter my pencil lines just a bit to show what direction that flesh is going in. So if it's more horizontal, after I've put down that 45-degree angle layer of value, I can come back over the top of that with a little bit of a cross-hatching pattern to apply another layer of value down to that area. Now you want to reserve the white of the paper for your brightest highlights, which means then that you're going to have to put a very thin layer of value down so that those whites are represented as the white of the paper. Very, very delicate cross-hatching in those light valued areas. Erasing some of these heavier passages. And coming back through here with a little bit more delicate handling of some of the anatomy in here. Okay, now coming back around over here to the rest of the torso, I'm going to erase some of my original lines. Again, the contouring of the belly comes down and around like this. And the fabric draped on her. Just sort of hangs in that general helps to define the edge of the leg a little bit over there too. Okay, so I have my model set up here just to get my mind into, do I like this pose? Do I want to try this? Whatever. So I'm going to hold my paper here and do some sketches. Okay, so I have my paper set up here and I'm just using just a regular pencil. This is a architect pencil. You can use any kind for this. These are just studies. So I have my model where he's going to stand for this shorter demo. Just going to start out with just sort of a gestural to get the feel of where my model's going to be on here. So I'm looking at the angle of his face. Now understand too that your model is going to sink into their pose. So maybe get the areas where you might see that movement first. I'm also looking at this background space back here behind the head as I work toward getting the rest of it in place. So looking at the shoulders here. Now I'm also looking at where the head falls, the tip of the forehead falls. If I draw a straight line down, locking my pinky on the edge of the paper, drawing my finger down like that. And then you can measure how many heads down this is. And this sketch, I'm going to do a few sketches here to begin with, and lock your arm when counting heads. I'm moving my finger down my pencil, just like we did in the earlier stages of learning to draw. The tip of my pencil is on the top of his head, and I move down. From my thumb is on his chin, locking my arm. The tip of my pencil now is on his chin, and I'm seeing where the next head goes. The next head goes just below the chest line right there. That's one head. The next head goes right about where the belly button would be. So I'll have to come on here then and say, okay, this is the head. I've determined that that's the size that I want to make this. One head, two heads, three heads. Now, again, I find a new measurement on here. If I go back again to the head, 1, 2, 3, 4, down about to the knee. So that's one head there. That's about where the hand was. And this one is about where the knee was. All right, so that gives us a place to work in for here for now. So again, now that I have those marks laid out, and I've drawn myself something of a plumb line from the corner of his forehead up at the top, straight down, I'm just going to look to see where this, the figure starts to take these different angles and turns. Keeping my pencil very loose. Now this is something that I use frequently when I'm drawing a figure. This is called a plumb line, and it's just a heavy cord with something weighted. I'm going to hold this up like this, and I'm holding it straight and vertical where I see his forehead intersecting his arm, if I draw the line straight down, and the knee down below. So I'm here, making sure that it's straight. Forehead, and you can use a T-square for that too to get a proper line there. Now, when the model takes a break after a few minutes and then they go back to their pose, I'm going to be able to have an easier time of putting it all back together again. And his other knee was about in this area. So this is, again, just a quick sketch. I'm going to decide on a pose that I like here when I get to that place. I may stick with this pose because my model looks pretty comfortable leaning against the wall. But we'll try a few more. And the foot comes down like this. And the other foot's over here. Okay, so that's fine for one pose, just to see where we are. All right, let's try another pose. Okay, so I turned him just a little bit, and I'm just gonna sketch a really simple, again, starting with the circle for the head, and his head is tipped down, so that means we don't see much of the neck. Just checking on the gesture of this pose. He's kind of slumped into the chair like this, with the foreshortening of this thigh coming at me with the knee here. And this one comes over this way. I love that hand over there. So I'm thinking if the model likes this pose, this one looks a little better. I like the glass in his hand. All right, so I'm not worried about the chair. In fact, I have it covered in fabric, so it's not a central character here. So this is fine for assessing whether or not I like this pose. I can come back through here with a few key ideas of, okay, this goes like this, the head comes up here. Nothing is measured at this point. I'm just seeing how I like this gesture. And what can I sculpt out for shadows? Got some foreshortening in this arm. And I'm looking at this negative space created from the arm and the torso in here. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead with this pose. I think that this was a more interesting pose, and my model looks very relaxed, so I think we're going to stick with this. Now what I'm going to do is keep the idea of this sketch handy. It's sort of like a thumbnail sketch, and I'm going to move into bringing up my canvas over here. Now before I have him move, I'm going to take my masking tape and go along and tape off where his arms and legs and feet are so that he can get back into this pose before he takes a break. So whenever your model needs to take a break, make sure that they are marked and that they have a spot to where they can look at. So this is what I mean. So his elbow rests about here on the arm. So we're going to put a piece of tape there so he knows where to put that. I'm going to put his foot, we're going to put a piece of tape right on, we'll put it on his knee so he knows to put that foot right there. And the elbow on the other arm, there. And I think we're all set. That's all you need to do to tape off your model. Now they can take their 5-minute break or 10-minute, and then we'll have them come back and we'll get started. Okay, so the model is back in their pose. And I'm going to start on the canvas now. And all I'm going to be using on my palette here, you won't see much of my palette today, is the burnt umber and ultramarine, is burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And in my palette cup, I have a little bit of the odorless mineral spirits to help thin it down a little bit. So I've got my paper towel here, and I'm just going to put him on this canvas. I don't know that I'm going to worry about going all the way down to his feet, since I don't think it's that necessary. So I'm going to put the head about in here, and right now I'm just figuring out size and placement for composition on my board here. And this is a piece of linen glued to masonite for my painting surface today. So I'm just trying to figure out, according to my sketch too, what would be the most suitable placement here. And I think if his legs, the knee comes down about here, and this one just kind of goes off, then we have this nice fluid line like this through the painting. Let's see, Danny, that elbow was back a little bit more. And Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we're going to try to get all of the essentials laid down here before he takes his next break. So he's given us a very interesting angle for his face, and that's okay. It's tipped down. So when you have your model set up, don't worry about exactly what their face is doing in the early stages of your painting, because that's going to change and shift. But I do like, for the purpose of the mood of this picture, that his head is tipped down. So we're going to go with that. And I'm looking to see where his shoulders intersect the neck and face. And they pretty much cut it, not in half, but maybe by a third. His chin is down here. Nose, the eye line. So we're going to decide that this is the shape that we're going to be going with for the head. The chin is here. And there's really great shadow on him too. Most of this is all in shadow. And then the shoulder comes in this way. So the ear, neck, and shoulder. This division over here is very important, that you get the relationship of between the ear, the neck, and the shoulder accurate in there. And that doesn't need to be that light, but for the sake of this. And then we'll paint this darker in here just so you can see that I'm using the background to sculpt out that form. That's all background. I'm looking at, remember in the very first year of the Academy, and some of the very first lessons that we talked about is in capturing angles. I had you draw angles this way and that way. Here's an angle where his face meets his shoulder. And trying to get that exactly, that angle is the whole reason we did those lessons, because you'll come across angles most often in what it is that you're working on. So then his face casts a shadow in this area. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of that in so I start to get the sense of form already. All right. Now, here's his head, and I have that as our standard of truth. I'm going to measure how many heads far down I have to go. So again, locking my arm, and I move my thumb to his chin and the tip of my brush to the top of his head. That's that measurement. Now I'm going to take and move that down. The tip of my brush now is on his chin, and my thumb is about in the middle of his belly. Okay, so let's get that first measurement on here accurate. So there's my head. Putting the brush now on his chin. This is about the middle of his belly. So the chest line is up here. And I'm assuming the belly button would be somewhere in here. So we will carve out looking at where the pec muscle falls directly under his ear. The ear is there, and that shadow gives us that form. And you want to get that in the right place. Now I'm using my brush sort of like a pencil. I'm drawing in the shadow at this 45-degree angle mark. This whole chest cavity, the thoracic cavity in here, where that structure is taking place. And there's this really great slump to his form, which has an interesting gestural quality. Okay, so there's that head measurement from there to there. Now I'm going to take that measurement and test how wide I need to make everything. Okay, so put your head back where it was, Danny. On top of your head. There you go. Can you put the top of your head a little bit more towards the ceiling? Kind of there. No, back there. Okay, that's fine. Heads are funny things in that the slightest tip this way or that way, and you can get it all different. So I'm taking that head measurement, and I'm putting my thumb now on the edge of his shoulder on that side, and seeing where the tip of my brush falls under his face. So locking my arm, the tip of the brush, if I drew a line straight up, goes right on the edge of his face. So I'm going to come over here and take this head measurement, and I'm going to draw the line straight down from the edge of his face. And right over here where my thumb is, that's how wide he is, according to my measurement over there. I'm going to take that measurement again and go from the edge of that arm back this way to see where it hits his face coming from the other direction. So again, same thing. Tip of the brush on the top of the head, the thumb moves down under his chin, tipping my hand over and putting my thumb on the edge of his deltoid, the shoulder over there, seeing where the tip of my brush hits his face. It's straight up from his neck. So I'm going to come over here and go straight down to determine how wide that is. So let's work backwards. Measurement, tip of my brush on the edge of his neck, and then over. So that is how wide he is that way. Okay? Now, eventually you may get to the place where as you're working and you don't have a lot of time, that you can make these measurements with your eye. But I always will double check with the head, because getting these shapes and measurements accurate in the beginning is vital to get your building blocks correct for the rest of the entire painting. This is the area, this is the part of the painting where if something goes wrong in this stage, it's all going to go wrong. So build your foundation accurately, and the rest will, it's still a journey, it's still a struggle, but at least you can know that you got the foundation accurate. Do you need to take a break?
My foot's falling asleep, but I'm good.
Okay. All right, so it's possible that I got this negative space in the armpit over there up too high, but I do know that that's wide enough. The shoulders are wide enough now. So there was a negative space in this corner here. He's sunk into the pose that way. When you're working with live models, that can happen. You can either tell your model to adjust a little bit or ask your model to adjust, or you can work on your painting to change it if it's not too far gone. The further we get into the painting, the more difficult it is, and you have to really make sure that your model stays in the pose. Okay, so here was that belly button mark that we measured down. Now I'm going to come over here, and I'm taking my brush and giving myself a horizontal. And again, going back to the very first lessons that we did in the Renaissance Academy, we gave ourselves helper lines. Well, this is a horizontal helper line, and I'm running it right across that middle belly mark, right across this way. And I'm doing that to the model over there to see what it intersects for important features along the way. So coming over here, laying the brush across his belly, I see that it hits the middle of that forearm and just about the elbow of this arm. So let's draw that line on here so we can see it. All right, so there's that. Now we do have an imaginary plumb line on here, and I still have my plumb line handy. Now I used this when he was standing, but you can also use it when they're sitting. And so in this case, let's just give this vertical and see where it hits on our model. So if we cut his face in half and we draw the line straight down, it hits his hand. We're not at the hand yet, and I'm not sure that he's settled in, the one holding the glass, that's where it's going to go. But when we get to that point, we'll have to make sure that the model holds still for that. This week, we are just going to work on getting the placement of everything accurate. Next week, we'll be doing more with color. So looking at this little triangle, it's almost a boomerang shape of shadow and negative space behind the arm. Looking to see where that falls under the ear. It's directly under it, and I know that it intersects that horizontal line. That's too high though, so we'll bring it down a little. Now this little wedge of shape, I'm gonna have to, now that it's in place, and whenever I get him back from his break, we'll have to get that exactly where it is now. So getting this elbow in. And the hand is directly under the face. So now he's going to have to bring that always back to that place. The t-shirt comes about below like that. And I'm looking at this, again, this negative space on this side. And the arm that comes out. And remember, this horizontal arm cut the forearm about in half. So that means the arm goes that way, and this one comes. And that is all in pretty much in shadow, but then this hand comes out like that. So again, this entire passage can be painted by painting this negative space. We've got the shirt slumping here. And then that's about where the thumb is going to be. So again, painting all of this negative space back in here. Looking at that shape. And it's going to be different from the way that you see it on the camera, but you get the idea. You'll have your model set up, and if you're following along, you'll see what I mean by setting your model up and looking for those passages like that. Those are special ones. You want to hold on to those areas where you have negative space. So I'm just wiping out some areas where I see a little bit more highlight in here, just so I can start to see some of that form taking place. I always feel I want to try to get this part somehow figured out so that I can start to see some form and shape taking shape. Okay, and then the leg comes down. Now we have this foreshortening happening on the thigh here. So that we've got, I'm just going to darken some of the background here. Just a little bit. I don't need to go the whole canvas. But you can take care of some other things like this during the breaks. But I encourage you to not try to work on this when you do not have a model, because our mind thinks we know, and we fill in what we think we can guess at, and it's oftentimes it can be way off. And so just really just wait until your model comes back. So I can talk for a little bit too about what I have set up here in the studio. I have some soft lighting on him. One of the bulbs is an incandescent and the other is a daylight. No reason other than that I do like a little bit of a warm light, but the regular daylight bulb gives a little bit of coolness. So there's sort of this balance of warm and cool playing on that, but it is overall warmer. The light that is on my easel here today is a cool light. So we're getting some of that. I've got daylight coming in the window behind me as well. While I'm working on this painting, I'm looking for places already to where I can get the feeling of edges being lost and showing form and contour. The torso here, I love the relaxed sort of slump of this pose. And so I'm using the t-shirt's wrinkles to my advantage to really show that form as well. And you can also, the light as it's shining down is hitting on the more level part of his torso here where it is sort of slumping out. This way you can take a little bit of white at this point just to kind of accentuate the fact that this is lighter here and it's a little lighter up here too, where the light is stronger some places. So you did feel free to pop in a little bit of light where you see it. We're going to let some of that go into the background too. And this arm over here has very lost edges. You don't really see it that well. We're going to see it better when I darken the background behind it. Like that. Because we started with a middle tone on the canvas, I can use dark areas and paint around middle tone areas to really show that form in there a little better. So the hand over there is just kind of relaxed, and there's this angle on the top. We'll get to hands next week, painting them. Unfortunately, we only have 2 weeks to do the figure, so we could spend years just studying the figure, and since we only have 2 weeks and then we're going to get right into portraiture, we're going to keep our study of these other anatomical features to a minimum, but I do encourage you to take the time to really break down the study of different features such as hands and feet and backs and so forth. So I painted his thumb by painting around that middle tone in there and painting the background to get the thumb in place. Checking that angle. It's more like that. All right, and then a little more blue to this brown will give this shadow over here much a darker, stronger, flatter depth to it. All right, my hand comes down. We do have a nice light hitting this hand, and if I had all the time in the world, I would take and make this hand really beautiful, because it's such a nice entry into the whole painting. On this side, just kind of be a little bit more a part of this background here. I want a darker tone on this. It's important that these values and the construction get as accurate as you can in this first pass through this painting, because again, this is your foundation. Using that black background over here to help define that form. Okay, now we're going to work on getting more of these lower anatomical features in place. So getting the arm here and drawing the line up to see where it hits the face. And the glass is... No, don't think about it, just be natural. Okay. So this other foot, I'm looking at the distance of the hand and where it comes in relation to the leg over here, in relation to the foot. All of these features here need to work together. Okay, so we have more shadow on this side. Okay, this is shifted, so it's not that angled that way anymore, so we'll angle it this way. And the knee falls directly underneath the hand over here. Occasionally you'll see me switch my brushes. What that means is I am switching to, this is, the bigger one is more my massing in brush, and the smaller one is more my drawing, get it in place, correct brush. All right, so that works for that. So we're going to give the chair a little bit of form in here so that it is clear that he's sitting on something. Okay, and since we're going to be discussing portrait studies next week, we're going to work more on the face then. I do want to try to get a little bit of it in right now so we can have a sense of the mood. So I'm going to grab that, looking to see where the eye line intersects with the neck and the shoulder line here, and the nose. The mouth, when the head is tipped down, the mouth is right underneath the nose. All right, so at this point when everything is pretty much in place, I want to come back through and just refine things before I stop for this first session. Just making sure that all of my key places and key features are in place. as accurate as I can get them. The shirt, shoulders, torso, the negative spaces, because when I ask the model to come back then for the next session, these are going to be what I use to help get everything in place. I'm also going to take a picture of them exactly as they are in this position before stopping for the day. All right, and that's as far as I'm going to take this today. Okay, so that wraps up this lesson today in our figure studies. So next week, I hope that you have had the opportunity to practice and get set up with your model. So next week, I hope that you will be at the place where you can pick up where we left off. So do some figure sketches, get some figurines from around your house, do everything you can to work from life. I want to strongly discourage you from working from photos in these two lessons because photos can distort. So definitely find some means of working on a figure from life, whether it's a statue or a wooden mannequin or you have a model. All right, so next week, let's get going painting this model.